Hey guys, it's Mandee. You know I love Hand and Stone Massage and Facial Spa in Tyler, and one of the things I love the most is they're always doing new things. And I recently tried their new sports massage, and I've got to tell you, it's incredible. So you know I'm active and I'm always focused on wellness, and this is just one more thing that I am adding in to my routine because now I'm hooked. They use the Theragun, which of course is going to help increase blood flow to certain areas and muscles that might be sore or tired or need attention, but you also get to add on another upgrade. You know, whenever I was there, I chose to go ahead and do the cup gliding as well as the hot stones. They work really well with the Theragun, maybe like a triple threat. Definitely ask for it the next time you go in to Hand and Stone. Ask about the sports massage. You can book your appointment today online at handandstonetyler.com, or you can stop by and see them. They're located in South Tyler in the Cumberland Shopping Center.
Welcome to the Celebrating Women podcast, hosted by Mandee Montana, a podcast that celebrates women, their stories, their struggles, and ability to overcome. Conversations that celebrate their gifts, their talents, and courage. It's the Celebrating Women podcast, presented by Hand and Stone Massage and Facial Spa in Tyler, Texas. With over 20 massage therapists and 6 estheticians, certified and trained in multiple protocols, you can get an affordable massage or facial located right here in the East Texas area. Book your appointment today. Stop by the spa in the Cumberland Shopping Center in Tyler or online at handandstonetyler.com. Welcome back to the Celebrating Women podcast. I'm Mandee Montana with my special co-host, Kellie Evanstein.
Hey there.
You know what that means. We're talking books, right? We love to read. And part of this series that we've been doing on strong women in fiction, specifically the books of Sarah J. Maas, we started with Akatar and Feyre Archeron and the strong women in the world of Prythian with our first 2 episodes. In the most recent 2 episodes, we've moved on to another series written by Sarah J. Maas, the Throne of Glass series. It's 8 books. And in the first episode, we covered Celaena Sardothien, our female protagonist. And it was the first half. It was the first 4 books of the series. So Throne of Glass, Crown of Midnight, The Assassin's Blade, and Heir of Fire. And then we kind of make this transition. She's an interesting protagonist because we also learn that Celaena Sardothien is also the lost princess, Aelin Galathynius. And we really see her step into that identity in the final 4 books: Queen of Shadows, Empire of Storms, Tower of Dawn, and Kingdom of Ash. And so the second episode was digging more into that identity and kind of how the story wraps up. But throughout both episodes, we've sprinkled in some mentions of these really interesting and powerful female supporting characters within these books, and that we really want to dig into some of their character arcs. And so that's what this episode is going to be all about. I'm very excited for it. Kellie is too. And Kellie, we decided when we were talking through how we wanted to discuss these characters that we would do it chronologically in the reading order that we both read through the series in. So we're going to turn back the clock and revisit Throne of Glass, correct?
Yes. So it just, there's so many interesting characters in this series, and if we're not careful as we're talking about it, it could turn into a big jumbled mass because there's so many strong women, there's so many different interesting character arcs, and just the characters themselves and storylines, and there's so much going on that if we just started talking about our favorite characters, I feel like either somebody would get lost or we would it would just feel chaotic. So we thought the easiest way to sort of talk through some of these other really strong females and interesting people is to take them as they're introduced to us. So we'll start with the first book with the supporting characters, because we've already spent a lot of time talking about Celaena/Aelin. We're not going to really talk about her except for in how these other people fit in with her in context, right? But talk about through each book who we're introduced to and why they're important.
Right.
So in Throne of Glass, we have 3 characters that we're kind of introduced to other than Celaena. And the first one is, one of the things we've talked about is the strong females that we talk about don't necessarily mean they're the good guys. We've got some strong females that are actually not very likable characters, but they do show strength. So we want to point that out because Sarah J. Maas does not just write strong, positive women. Some of the more negative or the unlikable people are also very strong women. So the first one we kind of come across is Caltaine Rompier, or I think that's how you say her name.
I think so.
And she's she comes into the story as a very spoiled, selfish, self-centered, jealous, shallow.
What is the word that I'm trying to think of?
Vapid.
Social climbing.
Yes, because her whole purpose in life is to be able to ensnare Prince Dorian so that she can be eventually queen.
That's right.
And so everything she does is to try to put herself in his orbit, make sure that
she's wearing the right gown.
And he likes white, so I'm going to wear white, or, whatever. Anything she can do to catch his eye and to put herself in a position to eventually become queen. And in order to do that, she sort of attached herself to this Duke who is the ultimate bad guy. He's we kind of alluded to this in previous episodes. The Vogue Prince that is the ultimate bad guy of the whole thing has sort of
embodied.
He's using this Duke's body is basically what he's doing. And so Caltaine has sort of attached herself to this Duke, acting like she likes him, but really she's using him so that she is introduced to the prince. And
we learn later that the Duke, or the ultimate bad guy, Erewhon, that's actually enslaved the Duke, we learn that he's actually using Caltaine.
Yes.
She doesn't know that at the time. It's a plot point in one of the later books, but in this particular one, she thinks she's using him, and she sets herself up as kind of a rival to Celaena, because as Celaena's introduced into the castle, a lot of people think that the prince is kind of a playboy, that she is the latest in the line of women that the prince is pursuing, and so she does not like Celaena. And so we see her attempt to set Celaena up to be killed.
She betrays her.
Mm-hmm. In the duel at the end of Throne of Glass.
And we kind of set that up in a previous episode where Celaena's involved in this competition to become the king's assassin.
Right.
And we told you that Caltaine sort of
poisons her.
Yeah. Trying to make sure she loses and gets killed. And
then the Duke rats her out in front of everybody at the end, and she ends up in a jail cell.
Yeah, in the dungeon.
In the dungeon at the castle at the end of Throne of Glass. And at the beginning of Crown of Midnight, we see Caltaine in the dungeon, and then she gets shipped off to Morath, which, if you read Lord of the Rings and you're kind of like, that sounds a little bit like Mordor, it kind of is.
It kind of is like Mordor.
It's kind of like the dark place where the demons are created for this demon army under Duke Barrington Erewhon, this character, this evil villain. And so he takes her from the castle there. And the reason that he does, it's later revealed to us, is because she has an element of magic within her. It's called shadow fire. Mm-hmm. And he's planning to use that, amplified through some other characters that we're about to meet, to take that magic and use it almost like a laser beam. Like if you think of the Death Star from Star Wars and how they're going to point that laser and, annihilate the planet. It's a similar function. They're going to take the shadow fire and put it through a device that's going to be powerful to eliminate armies. So, and kind of we told you about the word keys that were central to the plot. Everybody's trying to get these word keys because power is wrapped up in these word keys, and the Duke has implanted one in her arm. Yes, and she is basically become a shell of what she was. But let's get back to, we're talking about powerful women, and she's a really kind of not likable character, and she ends up in the dungeon. But I think this is an important part because this kind of sets up some of the there's so many things that Celaena / Aelin does throughout this book and her interactions with other characters that end up coming back later
because of an act of kindness or a relationship, or
she calls them threads in the tapestry.
Yes,
throughout
because
the
of
book.
because of a decision that Celaena makes early, it comes back to help her later. So I kind of want to talk about that with Kaltain.
Yeah, for sure.
Because when she's in the dungeon, Celaena does not like her, and she's very angry, but she kind of goes down into the dungeon to sort of
Get some information
get
out of
some
her.
information and find out why and what happened and why did she why she did what she did. And Kaltain is kind of losing her mind because this key has been implanted in her. It's giving her these bad headaches, and she's, because these keys,
They've gotten her addicted to opioids too.
Yes. And so she's just in a bad place, and she's down in these dungeons. She's dirty. She's underfed. It's freezing cold down there. So she's, it's just a bad situation. And she really doesn't really talk that much to Celaena, but Celaena gives her her cloak. Mm-hmm. And so that, because she's so cold, Celaena leaves her. She doesn't get the information she wants because Kaltain's really incapable of that. But it's a kindness that Celaena does by leaving her cloak so that she's warm. And that's important later. Like, do we want to...
Yeah, and Kaltain is like, make the bastards pay.
Yeah, I mean,
that's the one like moment of clarity that she has to Celaena. She's like, make these bastards pay, whatever. And we don't really totally understand what that means in the moment, but it all comes to light. And I think go ahead and talk about Kaltain's whole arc now.
Yeah. So later on, she ends up in Morath and runs into a lead, which is another character that we're going to talk about in a minute. And she knows that they're using her, and they're using her power. And so let me kind of explain how, because we've talked about the collars, where you're trapped by these collars, and it's the ability for these demons to kind of take over your body when you have one of these collars. Well, this key that's embedded in her arm does the same thing. So she's had sort of this demon inside her, this Vogue, but she's learned to
sort of protect herself from it a little bit. She's sort of hiding within. So it's interesting because there's this interplay that happens between the human and the Vogue whenever they've been sort of taken over by the Vogue demon. And the human is still in there, but the demon Vogue sort of
overpowers them,
suppresses them with bad memories and feelings of guilt and shame. And so what's interesting about Kaltain and the strength that we see in her, there's this inner strength that she doesn't show us as in her human form, that we see after she's been overtaken by the Vogue. We see that she's actually got like this moral compass within her, and that she manages to maintain a sense of identity, even though she's enslaved, where most people don't, but she's kept it hidden from the demon. And so she makes it think that she's weak and suppressed and whatever, but she's actually just biding her time until this moment when she realizes that there's an opportunity to repay the kindness to Aelin and help a lead and really stick it to the man.
Yeah, so what she does is she removes this key from her arm, and it's wrapped in a piece of the cloak that Celaena had given her in the dungeon. And she tells Aelin, get this to Celaena Sardathian, because Aelin does not realize that Celaena and Aelin are the same person. So she's going to go try to find
both
Celaena.
Women.
Yeah, she's looking for Aelin as her queen of Terrasen, but she knows she needs to get this key, it's like a
stone.
rock. It's a stone.
Yeah, black stone, but it's got a weird energy
power
about it.
Yes,
but Aelin doesn't have any clue what it is.
Right. She just knows that it's powerful, and Kaltain sacrifices herself. So she gives Aelin this rock wrapped in the cloak because she knows that Aelin will recognize Celaena, I guess, she knows her as Celaena, will recognize that was her cloak. And she gives Aelin a message to give to Celaena as she gives her, something about something about her kindness or whatever.
Yeah.
Yes. So she gives her a message so that Celaena will know, it's from her and why. And so as Aelin leaves, Kaltain uses her shadow fire and sacrifices herself by basically erupting and taking down one of the towers with all the evil in it and taking that tower down.
Yeah, it's a really powerful moment. And it's interesting because we don't get a lot of Kaltain's perspective, her point of view, but we do see her play that pivotal role. And, like Kellie said, she's very unlikable in the beginning, but we warm to her as she recognizes that she's being used, and she does not like being used. Like, she doesn't mind doing the using, but she does not like being used. And she's been used and abused in such a terrible way by Erewhon or Duke Parrington. There's some allusions to the fact that maybe she has been sexually abused by him.
Definitely physically abused.
And having, this rock that's been implanted in her arm, this word key is such power that it really messes with her mind and her body, and she's become very frail and weak. And it's really a wonder that she's got the internal fortitude to do the things that she does. And so she is one of the first women that we meet in Throne of Glass, but we meet two others that, again, play really pivotal roles in different plot points to move the story forward. And one of them that really carries throughout the entire series, all the way through the epilogue, even through her parents, is Nehemia, the Princess of Eelway.
Yeah, and even though she does not live very long, like she dies very early in the series, she's murdered. The idea of her,
oh man,
carries throughout the whole series, and she's sort of the hope. She represents the hope for a better world.
Do they call her the light of Eelway? Yeah.
So she befriends Celaena, and I think she knows who Celaena is.
Yeah,
she figures
does.
it out. She knows who she is.
Yeah.
And she's trying
But
to...
we don't know that she knows who she is until
later.
Like maybe the 6th book, I think, is when we figure it out, because the next character that we're going to talk about Elena actually interacted with Nehemia without us knowing it and without Aelin knowing it. It's revealed to us in Empire of Storms. And so we're introduced to them both in the first book, and they play pivotal roles throughout it all. But in the end, we're like, oh, wow, these two actually had a game and a strategy going.
Yes.
Like while Celaena was in Endovir.
Yes. Their
relationship goes back that far.
So Nehemia is a princess of Eelway, and she has come to Otterlin as kind of an ambassador, but that's what we think. She's really got some ulterior motives, and she's working behind the scenes trying to get some stuff done. But she befriends Celaena, and she is a very strong princess who loves her country, and she's actually there not necessarily as a spy, but she's trying to get information. She's a rebel, but she's trying to figure out a way to defeat the king.
She is there as a spy.
Because
she is feeding information to the rebels.
Yes.
From inside the castle.
Yes.
She's had communication with some of the rebels that you meet later in the series, and you then learn about the communications. But yeah, that's
you realize all these things have been happening after she's dead.
Yeah.
Like all of these things that she's been instigating all along that you really don't know anything about until after she's already dead. But she is someone that Celaena really looks up to. She epitomizes hope for a better world. And Celaena really thinks a lot of her as a leader. And, we talked about Celaena. She's pushed down that Aelin identity because she does not see herself as a leader.
Or want the responsibility.
Or doesn't want the responsibility because she doesn't feel like that she has it in her to be a queen. And so she ignores who she really is, because she does not feel like that she has that in her. And so she looks at Nehemia as just this beacon of what a queen and what a leader, and, you know, this shining light of hope. So, you know, like Aelin really looks up to Nehemia, and they become very good friends. And so when Nehemia is murdered, it sent, and we talked about this, it sends Celaena into a tailspin.
She's like in a primal rage.
Yes.
She's ready to kill everyone. Like, she is not okay. And she's really resisting, because at the end, she had a fight with Nehemia before Nehemia is murdered.
Right before she's murdered.
And in part because Nehemia is trying to get Celaena to recognize who she truly is without saying it. She's trying to call her into leadership,
To step up.
And it really pisses Celaena off. And she doesn't want to accept it or acknowledge it. And so then I think there's a lot of guilt that she's carrying, not just because she couldn't prevent the murder, but because of the fight that they had. And so she has this beautiful mourning period where she like sings in the old language of the Fae over Nehemia, and we don't really know that that's what she's doing at the time, because we don't know that she's Fae yet, but we just know that she's doing something to honor her. And later we understand really that that's what the Fae royals do in Terrasen over
when someone dies.
Yeah, and it's a really beautiful moment, and truly, like, we see later in the series that when she's singing over her, she also slices her hand open, and she makes an oath that she is going to avenge Nehemia and save the people of Ilwe, and she like drops her blood over her grave. And that scar on her hand is something that she turns to repeatedly throughout the series to remind her
reminder of her promise.
And of the hope that Nehemia carried, and of the responsibility that she now feels like she's carrying, that she didn't really want, but she's starting to understand that she has to carry. And the tragic and beautiful thing about Nehemia is we learn later in the series that she knew all along that she was going to have to sacrifice herself in order to move Celaena into the role of Aelin.
Yes. To push her to become who she needed to become.
And the interesting thing is, she learns that from Elena, thinking prior to getting that information from Elena that she is going to have to be the princess that sacrifices herself to make it a better world in the way that Aelin would, like having to lead and bring forth this army. She feels like that's her mantle to carry, but she learns that that's not her role. Instead, her role is to be the hope and the tragedy, and to give Aelin that sense of responsibility and courage to step into her leadership. And so I feel like that segues us into Elena a little bit more, because we don't meet her first through Nehemia. That's later in the series, but we first meet her with Celaena.
Yeah, she finds this hidden door in her chambers, and she goes down into these steps, and she realizes she's kind of in a hidden part of the castle, and she comes across a burial chamber that has Elena, who was the first
Queen of Otterland.
And
she was a princess of Terrasen as well. She was
she was Brandon's daughter.
Yeah. And Mala. Brandon and Mala's daughter.
Yes, Brandon and Mala's daughter. And so it's the burial chamber. So it's got the
like sarcophagus.
Yeah,
the tomb.
The casket.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah, and the statues.
Of her and Gavin.
And there's all these beautiful symbols, and it's kind of confusing because it's like the trees are on the ceiling and the stars are on the ground, and I'm getting into the weeds a little bit, but if you've read the books, you understand.
There's a lot of symbols there that the more she visits, the more these symbols mean something. So we don't want to get into all that. But she's down there, and it's like the ghost of Elena. It's like a spirit comes and talks to her, and she kind of guides her into things that she's going to have to do and different things, and she only gives her a little bit of
through the trials to build trust.
Yes, but she's sort of a guiding force for Celaena, then Aelin, as she moves through her journey throughout the whole series. Like in different times, Elena will come and give her a little tidbit of information, and then we realize they're all in this mess with Maeve and you know, all the things that they have to go through are because of decisions that Elena made way back 1,000 years ago.
It's interesting because all of this is revealed sort of slowly, trickles. You know, she shows up and, you know, she's pissing Selena off because she's only given her like a little bit of information. She won't tell her the whole story. And she's like, hey, I can only appear for so long or whatever. She's in and out. And that kind of continues up until the point of the 6th book in Empire of Storms, when she and Manon, we mentioned it in the last book, when she and Manon go into the lock, which is essentially, it's a witch mirror. We learn more about witch mirrors throughout the series, but they go in, and then Elena kind of goes back in time and shows this story of how Erewhon was trying to take over the world in her time when she and Gavin were fighting him, and they were unable to. The stories say they killed him. That's what the story is told in Otterland, but they didn't actually. They just entombed him. They locked him, and her mother, Mala, sacrificed her immortal life to forge this lock. So her mother, wife to her father, Brannon, king of Terrasen, the Firebringer, sacrifices herself to forge this lock. And it's really meant, you know, to send the gods home, right? Mm-hmm. And Brannon's been kind of carrying this with him for a while. Well, Elena steals it, and she entombs Erewhon instead, and so it pisses the gods off.
Yeah, because it's a one-time use kind of thing,
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
because it's been used to entomb Erewhon, it can't be used to send the gods back, so they're ticked.
They're ticked, and they force Elena to be this guide to whoever becomes the heir of fire, whoever Brandon's heir is in the future that ends up facing Erewhon. They charge her with this task to be this guide, to help her.
And sacrifice herself.
And to sacrifice herself to forge a new lock to then send the gods home. Well, as you know, the story has it, she's trying to get rid of Erewhon again, so she's got to make some difficult choices that we talked about in the last episode. But Elena really plays, even though she's not like a physical, she's more of a spirit.
She's a spirit, yeah.
In this world.
But in her own right, she was a very powerful queen.
Yeah, she was. And she made some difficult decisions, good, bad, whatever. You know, we wouldn't have the characters in play that we did if she didn't make the decisions that she made.
Right.
So that's interesting. But she does. And you know, through our conversation as we go on and introduce you to some additional female characters, Elena may pop up again. But that's kind of her role, is this guide to Aelin. So as we move forward into, you know, Crown of Midnight, we see more of Aelin, we see more of Nehemia. That's when she's murdered, and then we sort of circle back to Assassin's Blade, and that's where we are introduced to young Aelin. It's the prequel, remember, where we met Ansel of Briarcliff for the first time, Lysandra, the courtesan shifter, and Irene, the healer that travels to the southern continent. And so these women play really pivotal roles, as we mentioned, later in the series in the final books, but we're actually introduced to them in The Assassin's Blade. And do you want to should we start with Irene, maybe? Because we meet her before we meet Ansel.
Yeah, so we kind of talked a little bit about how they met in the previous episode, but there's a situation where Selena is being sent to study with the silent assassins in the Red Desert. It's kind of a training thing when she's still an assassin, and it's really kind of a punishment. Mm-hmm. And so we kind of went into all that in the last episode. But as she's waiting on the coast to catch the ship that's going to take her to the Red Desert, she meets this girl, she's a barmaid, and through their interaction, you know, I wouldn't say they form a friendship. It's like two ships passing in the night. They had this moment where it was a very powerful moment where Selena comes in and she saves Irene from being attacked by these bad guys, teaches her how to defend herself, puts her in a situation where she has to actively defend herself against these same bad guys that come back, and then leaves her with money because Irene had told her that she was trying to get to the Torre Chesme which is where all the healers train in the southern continent. And so
she'd sort of patched her up when they first met.
Patched her up,
before that's kind of how they initially, she's like, why is this woman bruised? What has she been through?
Yes.
And so Irene offers her a kindness of sort of patching her up. And that's when, Celaena first learns that she wants to be a healer. They go through this challenge. And so as Celaena's leaving to go to the Red Desert, she leaves Irene with the gifts.
Yes, with money and a brooch that's worth a lot of money and a note saying the world needs more healers. And so Irene becomes a very, very pivotal character.
Yeah,
so, because when we were talking about Aelin in the last episode, we sort of skipped over the book Tower of Dawn, because Tower of Dawn is Chaol's journey to the southern continent. And when he's there, to not only get them to be allies in this war and to bring their armies to help Aelin and Terrasen, but also he was injured in a battle with the king and he's paralyzed and he's coming to the Torre Chesme to get healed, and Irene is the one who is sent to heal him. She is the heir to the head of the healers, Hafiza. She's a very pivotal character because she's healing him physically. She's realizing that she's learning about these demons, and they're really kind of a parasite because that's what's inside Chaol that's keeping him from being able to walk. And she's realizing that her light magic and her healing magic can get rid of this parasite. But she's also kind of acting as the go-between between Chaol and the royal children of the Southern Kingdom
that she's befriended
in the couple of years that she's been there training at the Torre Chesme. She's gotten to be friends with the royal kids, and so she is sort of helping them
communicate
and Chaol communicate as Chaol is trying to convince them to come aid in his war. So Irene also, well, I'll let Mandee talk about how she becomes really important in the end.
It's interesting because through that process, we've talked a little bit about the Vogue demon enslavement, and Kellie touched on the fact that they're a parasite physically and mentally, emotionally. So part of what's interesting to me about the healing that Irene does is it's not just physical. Like, she basically puts Chaol through therapy.
Yes.
She makes him face the inner demons very similarly to the way that Aelin had to face her inner demons. If you remember Celaena, when she becomes Aelin, we were talking about that well that she fell down into when she faced the Vogue prince in at the end of the first episode, where we discussed how she had to sort of revisit these terrible memories all the way back to her childhood and then sort of rise again into her identity. Chaol faces a similar path that Irene forces him down because he is adamantly refusing to go down this path. But she finds a way through her gifts. I think her human gifts really is what helps pull that out of him, while her light magic is physically also healing him. It's very interesting to me how that all plays in. But so as they come back across the southern continent, Irene heals Chaol. She also heals one of the royal princesses that we'll meet later, which is part of what allows her to say to the Khagan, the leader of the southern continent, will you please bring your army to save my homeland? So as she comes back, she brings healers along with Chaol and these royals and their armies that they lead into Otterlin. And as we see all of the allies align back in Terrasen as Aelin is coming in to help Aedion and Lysandra at the very end, and they're facing Maeve and Erewhon in these two separate battles, you've got Aelin on the ground with Rowan and Lorcan and Fenris facing Maeve, and you've got Irene, who ends up teaming up with Elide, who we'll meet in a moment that we've mentioned, Lysandra and Prince Dorian to face Erewhon. And it ends up being Irene who takes her light magic and destroys Erewhon after they've sort of tricked him and utilized those ancient word marks to lock him into place through some trickery and some shifting that they do. Aelin ends up being the one who finally finishes off Erewhon. And there's two other women that, you know, played a really important part in this that are sort of minor characters. And Kellie and I were talking about this off mic last night, and I was like, you know, it reminds me a little bit of like Ruth and Naomi in the Bible a little bit, because, you know, in a separate Celebrating Women episode where I was talking with Rev Karn with Kimberly, we talked about how if those two women hadn't made the covenant that they did together, and, you know, Ruth hadn't gone on and married Boaz and then, you know, started the lineage that essentially created Jesus, I mean, it'd be a totally different world, right? Well, you've got these two women in the Throne of Glass series that are minor characters. You've got Aelid's mom, Marion, that protects Aelin and saves her, sacrifices herself so that young Aelin can get away after her parents are killed. And then you've got Irene's mom, that Josephine, that sacrifices herself to save her daughter. That if those two women hadn't sacrificed themselves to save these two now adult women when they were young, we wouldn't be in the place that we are. So
a whole different world.
And so
the world would have been destroyed by the Vogue.
It comes back to like the masterful craftsmanship in Sarah J. Maas's world, and the fact that, again, she has chosen that it's women. It's these two women that make pivotal, powerful sacrifices early. They're just kind of mentioned in the book. But without them, it's mentioned in Kingdom of Ash. I just love the way that it's all tied together with a big bow at the end. That without these two, you know, moms, these mothers, Irene and Aelin wouldn't be able to take down Erewhon and Maeve in the end. And we have so many more people to tell you about, so I'm going to move on. Because in Heir of Fire, we meet Maeve. We get to start to uncover some of the layers of Maeve. And we
kind of brushed over Ansel and Lysandra
we meet. Oh, shoot. You're right. We have to go back to Lysandra and Ansel.
We kind of told a little bit about Ansel's story.
Thank you.
When we were doing when we were going through the books in the last episode. But Ansel is who Selena meets when she goes to train in the Red Desert with the assassins. And Ansel's been there for a while. They're roommates. They become friends. And then Ansel betrays the silent master. All the silent assassins, but the master. And so as part of her punishment, you know, they send her away, and Aelin's supposed to kill her by shooting her with an arrow, and she doesn't. She tells her she's given her 20, she's going to shoot. She better take off on her horse, and Aelin's going to send the arrow in 20 seconds, and she waits 21 seconds. So the arrow hits right behind. So it's a life debt, because Ansel knows that Aelin gave her an extra second to get away, or an extra minute. I don't remember.
I think it's seconds.
But gave her that extra time to get away. And so, you know, then Ansel, when Aelin calls for aid later, then Ansel then comes back and becomes very pivotal in Aelin being able to win the war in the end. So that's a very brief, but once she leaves, she builds an army and becomes the queen of
the Wastes.
Mm-hmm. And so she becomes a very pivotal character in the end in winning the war.
You know, it's interesting. I just realized this. Ansel betrays the silent assassins, and they lose a lot of assassins, and that a lot of people are killed. Aelin comes back and helps kind of save the day in the end. But later in the series, when we see Ansel come back and bring her army to help, at one point, the majority of Ansel's army is slaughtered and sacrificed. So it's you know, it's interesting because it's a little bit of karma, right? Mm-hmm. And then, you know, Ansel not only answered the call of Aelin and they fight together in the end, but she also talks with another character that we're going to dig into in a moment, Manon, who is a witch, and the witches also come from the Wastes. Mm-hmm. And so she offers to Manon, like, hey, we can live in peace together. towards the
Yes.
end, which is something that, like, when you initially meet Manon, you're like, there is no way
she's going to work with anybody.
She's not peaceful. But towards the end, we see a great character arc with her. So we'll get to that in a moment. But first, we probably need to go back to Lysandra.
So we talked a little bit about her. She was
Yeah.
the one that was the courtesan. She was very immature when she and Aelin were teenagers. They were rivals. Basically, I think they were rivals for not only Arabin's attention, but Sam's as well.
Oh, yeah.
And Lysandra was not a likable person. Later on, she's got a very interesting story arc. Like she as she becomes a courtesan and she is treated poorly, it changes who she is. And there is a young girl named Evangeline that she comes in contact with that is going to be trained to be a courtesan. And she does not want Evangeline to live that life. And so she maims her. She scars her face in order for her not to be as beautiful so that she doesn't become a courtesan. So she's trying to protect her from living the nightmare that she's had to grow up and live. And by doing that, she sort of took on extra time as a courtesan because of the madam that owned her, named Clarice, basically said, since you've taken her ability to earn me money away, you have to pay off that debt. Mm-hmm. So she basically sort of sacrifices herself in order to save this little girl. And so when she and Aelin come back into contact, Aelin has a hard time trusting that she's changed. But as they work together, Lysandra becomes her very best friend, and other than Rowan, probably the person that she trusts more than anyone. And I say that because we've said several times, Aelin did not share her plans with anyone. She had all of these things that she was doing in the background that she didn't really tell anybody about, but it turns out that she did tell Lysandra. And they had a plan because when Aelin is taken, she has Lysandra act like she's the queen so that they can just continue on with the plan and nobody's the wiser and don't realize. Because Aelin knew she was going to have to sacrifice herself to create this lock to put Erewhon away. So she knew she wasn't going to be around because she thought she was going to die. But she knew that she was a very important symbol for the movement. And so she has Lysandra become her so that everybody else continues to fight thinking that she's still there. So they become very, very close. Lysandra probably fought as hard or harder than any man in this war. Mm-hmm. And she fought not only as Aelin, but she fought as a snow leopard and as a wyvern and as a sea dragon and whatever creature or person she needed to become to win battles. That's what she did. I mean, she was a fierce warrior, but also incredibly loyal. Yeah. And, she and Aelin were very, very close friends and trusted each other in a way that they didn't necessarily trust anyone else. So Lysandra is a very pivotal person in the whole, this whole war, because it is a war. Mm-hmm. And the last 4 books are basically all one huge war.
There's lots of battles,
but it is a war. And Lysandra is pivotal in them winning.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Especially in the end. So we see her, you talked about her wearing Aelin's skin. There's a moment where they're in a battle and it seems like all is lost and the army is wanting to retreat because they've lost hope. And Lysandra knows the only way she's going to be able to rally the troops is to appear again as Aelin, because Aelin's been missing and they're fighting these demons and they need the Firebringer, but the Firebringer is locked in an iron case and nobody knows this. They just think that she's away on some other mission. And so Lysandra wears Aelin's skin essentially and leads the charge without the skills of an assassin. She's got some skills, but she's not really that great at wielding a sword like Aelin is, and she certainly doesn't have any fire magic. But the troops see her and they rally, and I'm starting to get emotional, like I want to cry whenever I think about it, because she's like leading this charge and she does not.
She has no power.
She has no power. And she gets kind of taken down. Adian gets her away. But she sacrifices not only herself in that situation. She is gravely injured. She does live, but she's so gravely injured that she shifts back into her human form, and they realize that she's not actually Aelin. And so it becomes this point where she feels like she's let everyone down, but it actually repairs her relationship with Aedion in a big way. And as they fight together in the end, her shifting ability helps Irene and Dorian in a lead to trap Erewhon and for Irene to cast that final blow. So yeah, she has massive, massive, massive impact. Without her, this story would be completely different.
Oh, for sure. So now let's get to Heir of Fire.
Yeah.
We come across several people in Heir of Fire. Maeve, we've already talked quite a bit about Maeve, but we'll talk a little bit more about her. Sorsha, she plays a very small role, but
Noteworthy.
So we'll talk about her. There's Nezrin, who plays a pretty pivotal role, and then Manon, who I will tell you right now is one of my favorite characters. She's fascinating.
Yeah, she's
and
awesome.
her 13, which Manon is a witch, but she's got 13. It's like she's
12.
12.
Yeah.
They're the 13, and it's like she leads these 12 other witches, but they're all very close. They're very loyal to each other. They're
like their own little coven.
Their own, yeah,
Within a coven.
Yes. And within the Iron Teeth witches, there's different covens. And Manon, who is the heir to the Blackbeak witch group, because there's 3 Iron Teeth: the Yellow Legs, the Blue Bloods, and the Blackbeaks. And Manon is the heir to the Blackbeaks. And these other witches, they're part of her coven, and she's just kind of the leader. But they're all really cool characters.
Yeah.
I love the 13. Just their loyalty and love for each other is pretty important. So let's start with, who do you want to start with? Sorsha, because she's kind of a small character. So Sorsha, she was a healer because remember, in Otterlin, magic is gone, but they still had healers. They just didn't use magic.
Yeah.
They used, herbs and, that
potions,
kind of thing.
Tonics.
So Dorian, who is the prince, gets,
we actually kind of
meet her. We just don't know we know her.
Yeah, like in Crown of Midnight, we mentioned briefly that Selena shifts into her fae form and has this crazy moment where she's enraged and she kills Archer Finn, and there's all this stuff that happens at the end of Crown of Midnight. Well, she gets pretty beat up. So do Chaol and Dorian in that process, and so does Fleetfoot, her dog, which we're just now mentioning, which is amazing to me that we've managed to leave Fleetfoot out. But Sorsha is the healer that patches them up, but we don't learn that until Heir of Fire.
We just know there's a healer.
Yeah.
So Dorian gets her. Dorian's the prince of Otterlin. He's the king's son, and he gets injured and goes down into the lower levels where the healers are, and he meets Sorsha, and she realizes he doesn't really remember her, and so she says something that makes him realize she's the one that healed them all those times that he and Chaol and Selena.
But she never said anything.
She never said anything,
even though these weird things were going on.
And so, she never turned him in, and she realized that Dorian had magic, but she didn't turn him in, which was against their law. If you knew somebody had magic, you were supposed to turn him in, and she didn't. She kept his secret. So they struck up this friendship and really kind of became romantically involved, and Dorian loved her. And it turns out she was kind of a spy for the rebels, and she's killed in front of Dorian. She's beheaded by his father. And when we have the big battle and all these things, but watching her be beheaded by his father really impacted Dorian. And throughout the whole rest of the series, and his thought processes, his emotions, the decisions he makes, who he becomes, just his whole personality.
Don't you think?
It does mature him, but his whole personality shifts because of
her sacrifice
and watching her be beheaded. That is a trauma that permanently impacts him.
Oh yeah.
So that's kind of I mean, she was a strong character in her own right, but she was a very small character within the whole story. But just her sacrifice and the things that she did, because if Dorian's magic was discovered, like he would be killed, or he would be, because it was, if you're magical, you're killed. Like that, there is no ifs, ands, or buts. She found ways for him to be able to stifle his magic because he didn't know how to control it. It was raw magic. So if his emotions were heightened, then his magic would kind of show up, and like he would freeze stuff or whatever. And she helped him sort of repress his magic so that he wasn't caught and arrested or killed. So she was a pretty important but small character.
Yes.
And you want to talk about Maeve?
Yeah, we've talked a little bit about Maeve, and this episode is running way long, so I'm just going to give you guys a heads up that this is going to be a long one, because we have a lot more to cover, and we're already about 45 minutes in. So Maeve is one of the big bads. We talked about Sarah J. Maas writes not only strong positive characters, but she writes strong negative characters. She also writes really morally gray characters. So we talked about Caltaine and how kind of like she was awful and then she was good. Well, Maeve is kind of like a little bit of the opposite. Initially, we're told that she's like the queen of the fairies and that she had these two sisters, Mora and Mab, which were also queens of the fairies. And one line of, I think it's Mora, that Rowan is descended from, and then Mab, Aelin is descended from. And then there's this third, air quote, sister, Maeve. She's not actually their sister. She's a Vogue queen that entered this world and is so powerful at casting illusions and mind magic that she went into the minds of, like, Brannon. We're talking thousands of years ago, right? Into the minds of Brannon to convince him that she was actually one of these sisters and that she is a Fae queen, and she's been masquerading as a Fae queen throughout time and
thousands of years.
And so everybody believes this story now, including all of our contemporary characters and even Brannon, because he shows up in a vision to Aelin at one point, and Aelin straight up asks him, is she Vogue? And he says no. So we learn later, as Aelin is enslaved and she manages to kind of fight back for a moment and throws a knife at Maeve, she cuts her cheek and it bleeds black, which is an indication that she's a Vogue. But then Aelin blinks and it's red, and she's like, I don't know if that was real or not. Well, as our characters are in the southern continent, they encounter a story keeper that we're going to mention in a minute, Hulin, who then tells them that no, in fact, the Vogue and the Fae, like this goes back thousands of years, that they were fighting in the southern continent, and there are these creatures, these spiders, some in the northern continent, some in the southern, that are related, that are Vogue, and they are handmaidens to Maeve. And it turns out that, Maeve has escaped Erewhon and his brothers, one of which she was married to, in this horrible world of like darkness and cold and awfulness, and she doesn't want to be there anymore. So she finds Aurelia and she stays there and she crafts these stories. And so there's a part of me that has empathy for Maeve, in that like she was escaping maybe an awful marriage and like apparently a hell realm, but she does it badly.
Yes, she's an awful person.
She's awful. And the way that she tortures Aelin to protect her own needs is like the opposite of Aelin, who sacrifices herself for the greater good of everyone else, right?
Yes.
So I don't know if there's much more you want to touch on Maeve. Those are some of the details.
We've already talked about her quite a bit.
But Nezrin is one of our characters from, Otterland that travels with Chaol. They're kind of romantically interlaced for a while. They go on this adventure to the southern continent for his healing journey and to convince the southern armies to come up, and they're successful. There's a lot that happens with Nezrin. Do you want to touch on kind of how we first meet her and then who she becomes?
So when the king is killed and Dorian then becomes the king, Chaol he was the captain of the guard. Then he was kind of fighting with the rebels. Then they make him the hand of the king. So when he was fighting with the rebels, he got to know Nezrin. He already kind of knew Nezrin because she was in the city guard. So as the captain of the king's guard, he knew Nezrin. And they had sort of a fling. So when he really meets her when they're, not meets her, but they start working together when they're fighting the rebels together. So she's fighting the rebels, or she's fighting with the rebels against the Vogue as well. The king is killed, Chaol's injured, and Aelin is there, all the things, and they decide to send Chaol to the southern continent in order to get allies and to be healed. Nezrin, they make her the captain of the guard, and she goes with Chaol to the southern kingdom.
Because her father is from there.
Yes.
And she has an aunt and uncle that live there. She's descended from...
Yes, and so she goes back. She's always wanted to go. She goes back, and they stay in the Coggins Palace. And so she's very interested because in the southern continent they've got their rook riders, and the rooks are these giant birds that they ride and into battle. And they also have the horse,
the
Dargon, which is the horse army that ride the horses. Well, she befriends one.
Sartak.
It's Sartak. The Coggin, which is the king of the southern continent, has several children, and one of them is Sartak. He's one of the princes, but he's also one of the head of the Rook Riders. He's a Rook Rider. And so she befriends him. She befriends kind of all of them, but mainly him. They end up becoming romantically involved, and eventually she's gonna be his wife. We don't know that. It's implied. Uh-huh. We don't get to that point. But she goes with him into the mountains where all the rooks are and the rook riders are, and she starts learning how to ride the rooks and gets very involved with them. And she and Sartak kind of go on this mission, and they encounter these giant spiders that are handmaidens to the Fog Queen. And I could talk a lot about that, but we've got to condense this. And so she becomes...
But she meets Borte and Hulan.
Yes, like Hulan is the hearth mother, so she's the one... She's kind of the grandmother but she's the really
She is Borte's grandmother.
She is Borte's grandmother, but she's kind of the head of all the Rook Riders. And Borte is her granddaughter. She's a Rook Rider, but she's a badass warrior.
A pistol.
She's hilarious.
She's a pistol.
Sartak has a sister named Hussar, who is, also one of the Coggins' daughters. And they're them and Sartak and Hussar and what's the...
Duva?
No, what's the brother's name?
Oh, Caution.
Caution. He's with...
Head of the Dargans.
He's with the Dargans. Sartak is with the Rooks.
And Hussar leads the Navy.
Hussar leads the Navy. And then there's two other siblings that we won't go into them because they're kind of minor characters. But these three are all warriors. Mm-hmm. These three siblings that are the Coggins kids. And so Nezrin gets in with Sartak, but she also makes friends with the other ones. We have Borte. I'm really going through these fast because these are all the people that are in the southern continent that we really meet in Tower of Dawn. But they all, through everything that happens, because... So you have to tell this part. One of the sisters that we don't talk much about, her name is Duva. She's just kind of a character. She doesn't really
Everybody
do anything.
loves Duva, and she's pregnant, and she's the only one that's married.
Yeah, she's quiet.
Well, I guess the other one's
doesn't really
married,
interact. Well, it turns out she has been infested with
a Vogue princess.
With a Vogue princess.
Oops.
And so they save her. Irene saves her by getting by killing the demon and getting it out of her, so saving the princess. And because of that, that's when they all agree to go with Chaol and Irene to fight this battle.
Yeah, and Irene actually is really closely befriended Caution and Hussar way before Kale and Nezrin even arrive. And so she's been sort of building those relationships. And as she gets to know Kale and understands like how awful this war is and that like it's necessary for the Coggin to like go and aid them, she begins to like strategize with Kale on how she can leverage her relationships. You know, we talked about the strength of relationships that Aelin has. Irene has that too.
Yes.
With the children of the Coggin. And so that really plays a pivotal role too.
And
all
turns
of that.
out, you know, we said that Aelin, when she was sending out all of these letters to all of these people
From Skulls Bay.
all of these people that she was kind of calling in that laughed at, all these people that she had come across. Well, she sent a letter to Hussar, strong princess to strong princess, like, hey, get your butt over here and help me. Mm-hmm. And you know, and so that was kind of a funny moment when
a moment of levity.
Yes,
as they later
prepare
meet
for battle. But yeah, so it's just really cool to see how it all comes together.
And Nezrin, I'm just going to tell this really quickly before we move back on to Manon and her 13. Nezrin makes this really pivotal shot as an archer in the battle that brings down the king. It's like this impossible shot. And so as she goes and meets the Rook Riders, they've already heard the story of Neith's arrow is what they call her. It's like this, I don't know, it's this old story that they've applied to her because it's like a honorific, essentially.
Yes.
And Sartak has already been falling for her and she doesn't know it. And so it's really sweet. But then, you know, as they go back, Sartak basically is like, you know, hey, I'm going to come help you. And then you're going to come back with me and be my empress, because he's named heir to the Coggin. And that's a whole other political fun story in Tower of Dawn that you'll enjoy. But Nezrin plays that pivotal role as well. Kale, Nezrin, Irene, all of them in getting the Coggin to come back. But she's a badass warrior and she's quiet. She's quiet about it. So it's kind of she's like the opposite of Aelin in that she's confident, but she's quiet about it.
And she's cool.
She's very cool.
Like
Not quiet is Manon.
She is a stone cold killer when we first meet her. Like, she is a witch and she
has been bred to be
a killer.
Evil.
Like, no remorse, no emotion, no feeling at all.
No, cold-blooded.
Just totally cold.
And Kellie mentioned this earlier when she was talking about the Iron Teeth clans of the witches. There's 3 of them. Well, there's also another set of witches. There's the Kraken. And the Kraken are kind of like the good witches. They used to be allied with Terrasen back in the days of Brannon. And they kind of battled the Iron Teeth. And they got into this massive witch war over their land. And they were brutally fighting. And the Iron Teeth kind of won out. But as they did, Rhiannon Kraken, the leader of the Kraken witches, cursed the land because the Iron Teeth were winning and they were being so brutal and hateful and awful that she was like, none of us will live here, Kraken nor Iron Teeth, because the land will not produce anything. So there's all these prophecies around the witches too that come to light at the end thanks to Manon. And I mean, we could do a whole episode on Manon and the witches. Mm-hmm. They're all female. There ain't a weak one in the bunch.
Nope.
Especially the 13. I mean, you've got like scholars, you've got, you know, just like a one that is just like stony and powerful and sorrel, and then you've got like Astrid that's like ice,
fiery,
like think Iceman from Top Gun.
Yeah.
That's like if Manon is Maverick, like Astrid is Iceman, but she's her second, and they actually work together, and like
they're cousins.
And they're cousins, and it's a really, really cool dynamic. Manon plays such a pivotal role throughout this. But like Kellie said, we meet her as a stone cold killer. But throughout her relationship with the 13, they're all really loyal to each other. They don't call it love. They don't think they're capable of love. But they learn through some trials and things that they go through alongside what Duke Parrington's asking them to do and some of the creation of Vogue demons that are happening in Morath. They're kind of being used as his aerial legion, and they realize that this is not something that they really want to be a part of, and they start to develop a moral compass.
Yes.
And as that happens, it really Manon ends up battling Aelin at one point, and then they kind of owe each other a life debt.
Because Aelin saves her, even though they've been battling each other. Aelin saves her from dying.
And then she ends up saving her a second time after Manon's like, hey, wait a minute, like, I'm not going to be evil. And she battles her grandmother.
Who is evil.
And then she gets, gravely wounded and ends up Abraxos. Again, a whole other episode we could do on Abraxos.
He's a wyvern.
Yeah, that is Manon's. He takes her to Aelin's ship where she's healed, and then they form an alliance. And that's, we mentioned it in our episode on Aelin the last time. They go into this like witch mirror and they learn that, Manon's got to play a pivotal role here that's separate from Aelin's, but they're going to complement each other, and they're going to end up rising both of their kingdoms basically from ash.
Yes.
But they're going to do it because of the other one, essentially. And so Manon goes off on this task with this word key while Aelin's locked away in the box, and she ends up going with Dorian. They become romantically involved, and there could be novellas on that I would definitely read because they are spicy.
For sure.
They are spicy and fun together.
But through that relationship, she does start to develop some emotions.
She's
She realizes, when she first kind of started having any kind of emotional reactions when she got attached to her wyvern, Abraxos. And, it's just very interesting watching Manon's character arc from stone cold killer to loyal friend, just a good person and someone who is able to be loyal, who's able to develop relationships. It doesn't say she falls in love, but you can kind of...
It's implied.
You can imply that she's falling in love with Dorian. And so there's just watching her... She's just a very interesting character, but she's kind of snarky, and she's just fun. I love Manon.
I do too. And when she learns Asteron's story, and that I'm not going to get into the weeds on that, but, she develops empathy and she realizes that it is possible for an Iron Teeth witch to love.
Yes.
And then she later learns that she's not just Iron Teeth, she's half Kraken, that her father was actually a Kraken prince. And so
she's the last Kraken queen and doesn't realize it.
But she's also heir to the Blackbeak clan. So her parents, her mother was killed by her grandmother shortly after Manon was born. And that's why Manon was raised so brutally by her grandmother and killed Krakens. That was like her
job, was to hunt and kill Krakens.
So she later realizes that she's a kin killer, and she's been killing her kin all this time, and so she has to grapple with that. But she also realizes that without the Krakens as a part of the Aerial Legion, she knows nothing about the Rook Riders that are on the way. They have to have something to battle the Iron Teeth witches
and their wyverns.
And so she goes and she begins to recruit the Krakens, and it's a process because they do not trust her. But she finds a way to sort of battle some Iron Teeth and then battle the matrons. And as she kills the Yellowlegs leader, she gets the Kraken Queen crown of stars, and she's able to unite the witches and invite them to go up to Terrasen. And oh man, the battles that are fought before Aelin even arrives
are brutal.
And we see the 13 sacrifice themselves
for everyone else.
And there's this really gorgeous, touching moment afterwards where the people of Terrasen take flowers out into this field where the 13 have perished, and they lay them there and they sing songs to honor these Iron Teeth witches that should be their enemies, but that sacrifice themselves for the good of the land. And that moment starts to lift the curse.
Yes.
Of the witch.
It's a beautiful.
Wastes. Yeah.
The way it's written is it's beautiful.
And to come back to the central point, it's all women.
Mm-hmm.
And who immediately follow Manon out is women. It's Lysandra, it's Elide, it's I think Evangeline. Yeah. That's who is immediately following Manon out there to pay tribute. And then all these other people follow. But it's the women that are kind of leading the charge out there. And so, I mean, again, we could do a whole episode on Manon, and who knows, we might do a whole other podcast on just these books maybe one day and dig into it.
So we need to get to a lead. So why don't you take a lead?
Oh my goodness.
And really, because we've talked about the women of the Southern Kingdom. I kind of brushed over them, but Hussar, Borte, Hulan, I mean, they're all important, but Aelin is kind of a central figure too.
For sure. And she starts out as a childhood friend of Aelin. Her parents are Lord and Lady of Peranth, which there are 2 cities in Terrasen, 2 main cities. Actually, I think there's 3, but the 2 primary ones are Orinth and Peranth. The capital is Orinth, where Aelin's raised. Aelin is raised in Peranth, but they're often in Orinth. So they know each other as children, but they're not close because Aelin's like setting things on fire all the time, and Aelin's kind of an introvert. So they don't necessarily... Aelin's not necessarily thinking about Aelin. She also probably thinks she was killed.
Yes, she does think she was killed.
And so Aelin has been trapped in a tower by her vicious uncle who killed her father for power. She's been trapped in a tower and
maimed.
Her leg is maimed, and then she wears shackles, and she's essentially a slave at Morath when she interacts with Kaltain and Manon. And Manon sniffs something about her and realizes that somehow she's got some witch blood in her, and also realizes, this is another point where Manon starts to develop feelings and empathy. She realizes that Aelid's uncle is bad news, and she starts to be very protective of her. Mm-hmm. And so she protects her a bit while she's at the keep. She uses Aelin as a spy. She gets Aelin out of the keep as Kaltain's bringing it down. And Manon is worried about Aelin as they are separated.
Yes.
And Aelin starts going on this journey on her own where she encounters... She goes off on this journey on her own where she encounters a fey male, Lorcan, that we think is bad news, kind of. He's morally gray.
He redeems himself.
But they become kind of partners in this journey. And Lorcan realizes that Aelin is carrying something to give to Celaena.
But he knows Celaena is Aelin.
But he doesn't tell
Aelin.
But he doesn't tell Aelin. And Aelin tells Lorcan, she gives him her mother's name, and they have this whole journey. And Aelid's strengths that we see, she has no magic, and the witch blood, you don't really see anything come from that. So her power, she can't even read. Not only is she maimed, she can't read. I mean,
she walks with a limp.
She walks with a limp. I mean, she's
not physically strong.
No one has cared for this poor girl up until Manon and Lorcan, really. Right. They're the first 2 people that show her any care, and she's so brilliant, though. She's become very sharp and observant, and that is her,
that's her strength.
Her skill, and she's able to, act and mimic and kind of become someone else a little bit. And so her strengths and her powers are very different than anybody else. They're entirely human. There are things that we could take on and embody if we needed to in our daily life. So I really love Aelin for that, because she kind of humanizes
the
whole story.
Because everybody has all these
powers,
these supernatural things going on, and she's just brilliantly human.
She's got this God that kind of whispers to her a little bit, but that's it, and I think we all kind of have a little bit of that in us, if we'll admit it. Like, we've got maybe a higher power that will nudge us. There we go. Nudged us right together, didn't he? But Aelin just doesn't have any kind of magical power about her, but she does have all of these human strengths that she embodies, and she really comes into her own. And man, alongside Lorcan, she totally softens him, because he is a brutal character, but he really starts to soften to her and melt. And then he gives up basically his blood oath to Maeve for Aelin, and begins to care for her and journey with Rowan as he's searching for Aelin in this iron box. And they they fight. They have a falling out. But then as they get back to the Battle of Aniel, Lorcan is like, okay, nobody cares about me or whatever. I'm going to go fight to the death out on this battlefield. And as Aelin is releasing that surge of power that we mentioned in the last episode, Lorcan could be crushed in this battle, and Aelin goes off on
to save him.
Chaol's horse, riding through essentially hell to save him. he wants to sacrifice himself on the ride back and she won't let him. I mean, it's like her inner fortitude is stronger than most.
Yes, for
I
sure.
mean, even Aelin, like her inner fortitude, I think is one of the most powerful that we see in the series.
Makes her very interesting. So then we get to Tower of Dawn. We've talked about Hasara, Borte, Hulan. What makes it so interesting is all of these leaders are women. Like you've got Sar, who leads the naval the fleet of the Coggan or the Cogganate, and you've got Borte, who is one of the top rook riders, and you've got Hulan, who she's the hearth mother, so she's basically over all the rook riders. So they're very interesting characters. They play a pivotal role in winning the battle overall. But what I love about Mass's stories is, again, and I've said this probably 6 times over the last several episodes, is that all of these positions of power she gives to women. Mm-hmm. And I love that. So we've talked about them. Let's get to the last book.
This is where they kind of all come together. Like, think Avengers Endgame.
Exactly. Brilliant comparison there.
I mean, even the portals, right? Like, they use the word key at the end to, like, open portals to come in and take on some of the big bads. Yeah. And they do that in Avengers Endgame, too. So I don't know if Sarah was inspired, if she's a Marvel fan or not, but it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah.
One of the things that I love, and I've touched on it a couple of times, but I think it's important, is the way the big bads are killed. So I think we should kind of finish with that. But there's a couple of characters that we haven't gotten to that I think we need to touch on briefly that Manon encounters in Kingdom of Ash. Do you want to talk a little bit about the Krakens?
Yeah, so the head of the Krakens she runs into her, and her name is Glennis. And it's actually Manon's grandmother?
I think either her grandmother or great-grandmother.
Yeah, something like that.
I think it's grandmother.
Yeah. And she's kind of a stabilizing force, I think, for not only the Krakens, but she's sort of because all Manon knows is the grandmother that raised her and the brutality that came with that. So I feel like when Glennis comes into her life, it's like a soothing balm to her because it's a very calming force, and she helps Manon step into being the queen and that unifying force to bring the witches together. So
I think she tells her to be the bridge.
Yes.
Something along those lines.
I feel like Glennis is very instrumental in that final piece of Manon really embracing sort of her humanity.
Yeah, because the witches, that when she first arrives to like the Kraken clan, man, they are bowed up.
And because she's been killing their kin for thousands or hundreds of years.
Right. And one in particular, Bronwyn, is just like, I'm not having this. Like, you are a witch killer. You are, get out of here. But she's able to win her over in part because of Glennis.
Yes. So, I mean, Glennis is a very important character that just comes in right at the very end, but also, she helps put the call out to all the Krakens to come and fight in the battle.
Yeah, she teaches Manon how to do that. How to do that, yeah. And that whole process, that part of the story gives me chills every time I read it or listen to it when it's a really beautiful moment. And there's some symmetry to like Lord of the Rings in Two Towers when they start lighting the fires in the towers and they're sending the signals throughout. If you've read or seen those movies,
that's what happens.
It's similar. They light a fire from this like eternal flame of Brannon that was given to the Krakens thousands of years ago that they've carried and protected all this time, even when magic was dead. This eternal flame, they light it. And Manon lights it, gives it to Bronwyn, and Bronwyn lights her hearth fire, and then she takes it to the next hearth, and then that hearth takes it to the next.
But what it culminates in all of these Kraken witches that have been in hiding, and they're living normal lives as mothers and wives, and all of these normal
pulling brooms out from under
Yes,
beds and
they're-
closets and
it
daggers
causes
and swords.
all of them to pull out their brooms and pull out their red cloaks, and I
got chills again.
And I know, me too. And they all take off to answer this call of the queen. So it was really cool. So that is basically all of these characters, and we've talked for a really long time, but we get very passionate about this series because we both love it so much and we love these characters so much. But kind of wrapping up and bringing it back to the importance of all of these strong females in the story. They win the battle, obviously, and Aelin is crowned queen. And once she goes through the coronation and she's crowned queen, it's typical for her to then walk out into her, the kingdom, walk outside of the castle to be among her people. And I feel like this is super important. So I'm actually going to read an excerpt from the book because I feel like
so beautiful.
It encapsulates what we've been trying to say through this whole thing.
Okay.
It says, "But Aelin, crowned and glowing, only said, 'Walk with me.' She gestured to the gates behind her. 'All of you.' This day did not belong to her alone, not at all. And when they all balked, Aelin walked forward. She took Irene Westfall by the hand to guide her to the front. Then Manon Blackbeak, Alid Lockin, Lysandra, Evangeline, Nezrin Falik, Borte and Hussar, and Ansel of Briarcliff. All the women who had fought by her side or from afar, who had bled and sacrificed and never given up hope that this day might come. 'Walk with me,' Aelin said to them, the men and males falling into step behind."
I've got tears in my eyes.
So she pulled all of these women to walk with her out into her people, and the men fell in step behind them. I think that is such a beautiful way to encapsulate what we've been trying to say through this whole series about how Sarah J. Maas writes such strong females, and the people who make the biggest difference within these stories are women. And this is this just is a beautiful way that is symbolized, because that's who Aelin has walk out among the people with her.
Well, it illustrates the primary strength that we keep coming back to in this story, which is relationships.
Yes.
And the relationships and friendships and the power of that within women, and how each of those different women have different strengths. But when you combine them, and when you're lifting each other up and you're not tearing each other down, when you're collaborating and you're not competing. I mean, a lot of those women competed with each other early on, and then they realized that the power is truly in collaboration and then lifting each other up
together
and working together. That's the true strength. And also, the reason this podcast exists. Same, theme running through it. Is we are not about tearing other women down. We are about building each other up and celebrating the collaboration and the strength of relationships and community. So if this touched you at all, we would really love to hear from you. If you have favorite quotes from the series, whether it's ACOTAR or this one, if you're a Maas fan like we are, we would love to hear from you and hear your thoughts, or if we missed something, because we probably did. There's just too much to cover. I mean, this episode's almost an hour and a half long. So we may have missed something, and that's fine. Please tell us if we did. Next up in our series of Maas read-alongs, so to speak, is Crescent City. And it'll be the following month. At this point, Kellie and I have a lot of reading to do. There's 3 books in what I think is going to be initially a 4-book series. She might expand it. But from what we know right now, 3 of the 4 books are written. So it's kind of still in development like ACOTAR is. There's a lot we don't know. And we're learning. I referenced Avengers Endgame earlier. This is a multiverse. And so some of the characters from this series and some of the characters from ACOTAR might have some interactions within Crescent City. We're going to learn a little bit more about that as we dig in. But I would invite you to go ahead and start reading House of Earth and Blood. It's the first book in the Crescent City series. If you want to go ahead and read on through House of Sky and Breath and House of Flame and Shadow, I would encourage you to do so, because there will be spoilers for all 3 books. We're going to tackle the main female character in that one, Bryce Quinlan, first. And then in our next episode, we'll tackle the other women of Lunathian and Crescent City as well. So thank you so much for listening to this. Kellie, any final thoughts?
Nope. I think we have talked long enough on this episode.
The Celebrating Women podcast wants to hear from you. Email us a voice message to celebratingwomenpodcast@gmail.com. We would love to hear your story or the story of an incredible woman you know. Become part of the conversation on social media. Facebook.com/celebratingwomenpodcast. On Instagram, search Celebrating Women Podcast. The Celebrating Women podcast has been presented by Hand and Stone Massage and Facial Spa in Tyler, Texas. Book your appointment today. Stop by the spa in Cumberland Shopping Center or online at handandstonetyler.com. Support the show for as little as $3 per month at celebratingwomenpodcast.buzzsprout.com or visit our show notes. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to subscribe to the Celebrating Women podcast.
Hey guys, it's Mandee. Have you been struggling to lose those extra pounds? Oh, I know. I have totally been there. An extra, 15 to 20 pounds can totally creep up on you in perimenopause. Or at least it has with me. And I think I found it early. I hope it's not happening to you. But if it is, I've got the solution. You can lose up to 15 pounds in 8 days with an incredible product line that I found and I want to share with you. Get a custom product recommendation with a complimentary wellness screening in the show notes. Just click Zing with Mandee.